Etruscan civilization is the modern name given to a civilization of ancient Italy in the area corresponding roughly to Tuscany, a western Umbria, and northern Lazio. The ancient Romans called its creators the Tuscia or Etrusia. Their Roman name is the origin of the terms Tuscany, which refers to their heartland, and Etruria, which can refer to their wider region. In Attic Greek, the Etruscans were known as Tau Upsilon Rho Rho Eta Nu Omicron, earlier Tzenois, from which the Romans derived the names Tyrrhena, Tyrrhenia, and Mare Tyrrhenum, prompting some to associate them with the Teresh. The word may also be related to the Hittite Taruisar. The Etruscans called themselves Rasenna, which was syncopated to Rasna or Rasna, as distinguished by its unique language. This civilization endured from before the time of the earliest Etruscan inscriptions until its assimilation into the Roman Republic in the late 4th century BC. At its maximum extent, during the foundational period of Rome and the Roman Kingdom, Etruscan civilization flourished in 3 confederacies of cities: of Etruria, of the Po Valley with the Eastern Alps, and of Latium and Campania. Culture that is identifiably Etruscan developed in Italy after about 800 BC, approximately over the range of the preceding Iron Age Villanovan culture. The latter gave way in the 7th century to a culture that was influenced by Hellenic, Magna Graecian, and Phoenician contacts. After 500 BC, the political destiny of Italy passed out of Etruscan hands. The latest mitochondrial DNA study shows that Etruscans appear to fall very close to a Neolithic population from Central Europe and to other Tuscan populations. Legend and history. Origins. The origins of the Etruscans are mostly lost in prehistory, although Greek historians as early as the 5th century BCE repeatedly associated the Tyrrhenians as Pelasgians. Thucydides 4.109, Herodotus 6.137, and Strabo 5.2 all denote Lemnos as settled by Pelasgians who Thucydides identifies as belonging to the Tzenois. And although both Strabo and Herodotus 1.94 agree that the migration was led by Tyrrhenus, Tizenus, son of Atys, king of Lydia, Strabo 5.2 specifies that it was the Pelasgians of Lemnos and Imbros that followed Tyrrhenus, Tizenus to Italy. The Lemnian-Pelasgian link was further manifested by the discovery of the Lemnos stela, whose inscriptions were written in a language which shows strong structural resemblances to the language of the Tyrrhenians. Dionysius of Halicarnassus 1.17-19 records a Pelasgian migration from Thessaly to the Italian peninsula, noting that the Pelasgi made themselves masters of some of the lands belonging to the Umbrae, and Herodotus 1.94 describes how the Tzenois migrated from Lydia to the lands of the Umbrians. Strabo 6.2, as well as the Homeric hymn to Dionysus 7.7-8, make notable mention of the Tyrrhenians as pirates. Pliny the Elder put the Etruscans in the context of the Rhaetic people to the north and wrote in his Natural History. Adjoining these, the Noricans are the Rhaeti and Vindelici. All are divided into a number of states. The Rhaeti are believed to be people of Tuscan race driven out by the Gauls. Their leader was named Rhetus. Historians have no literature and no original texts of religion or philosophy. Therefore, much of what is known about this civilization is derived from grave goods and tomb findings. A mitochondrial DNA study of 2013 has suggested that the Etruscans were probably an indigenous population. The study extracted and typed the hypervariable region of mitochondrial DNA of 14 individuals buried in 2 Etruscan necropoles, analyzing them along with other Etruscan and medieval samples, and 4,910 contemporary individuals from the Mediterranean basin. Comparing ancient and modern DNA sequences has suggested that the Etruscans can be considered ancestral. By further considering two Anatolian samples, it could estimate that the genetic links between Tuscany and Anatolia date back to at least 5,000 years ago, strongly suggesting that the Etruscan culture developed locally, and not as an immediate consequence of immigration from the eastern Mediterranean shores. Among ancient populations, ancient Etruscans are found to be closest to a Neolithic population from Central Europe. An mtDNA study of 2007 confirmed that the Etruscans were not related substantially to the Upper Paleolithic hunter-gatherer populations of Europe, and that they showed no similarities to populations in the Near East. Another earlier DNA study performed in Italy, however, partly gave credence to the theory of Herodotus, as the results showed that 11 minor mitochondrial DNA lineages extracted from different Etruscan remains occur nowhere else in Europe and are shared only with Near Eastern Anatolian people. Another source of genetic data on Etruscan origins has been developed by Marco Pellecchia and Paolo Agmone Marsan at the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart in Piacenza. Tuscany has 4 ancient breeds of cattle. Analyzing the mitochondrial DNA of these and 7 other breeds of Italian cattle, Agmone Marsan found that the Tuscan breeds genetically resembled cattle of the Near East. The other Italian breeds were linked to Northern Europe. The latter hypothesis gives credence to the main hypotheses, which state that the Etruscans are indigenous, probably stemming from the Villanovan culture or from the Near East. Etruscan expansion was focused both to the north beyond the Apennines and into Campania. Some small towns in the 6th century BC disappeared during this time, ostensibly consumed by greater, more powerful neighbors. However, it is certain that the political structure of the Etruscan culture was similar to, albeit more aristocratic than, Magna Graecia in the south. The mining and commerce of metal, especially copper and iron, led to an enrichment of the Etruscans and to the expansion of their influence in the Italian peninsula and the western Mediterranean Sea. Here their interests collided with those of the Greeks, especially in the 6th century BC, when Phocians of Italy founded colonies along the coast of Sardinia, Spain and Corsica. This led the Etruscans to ally themselves with the Carthaginians, whose interests also collided with the Greeks. Around 540 BC, the Battle of Alalia led to a new distribution of power in the western Mediterranean Sea. Though the battle had no clear winner, Carthage managed to expand its sphere of influence at the expense of the Greeks, and Etruria saw itself relegated to the northern Tyrrhenian Sea with full ownership of Corsica. From the first half of the 5th century BC, the new international political situation meant the beginning of the Etruscan decline after losing their southern provinces. In 480 BC, Etruria's ally Carthage was defeated by a coalition of Magna Graecia cities led by Syracuse. A few years later, in 474, Syracuse's tyrant Hiera defeated the Etruscans at the Battle of Cumae. Etruria's influence over the cities of Latium and Campania weakened, and it was taken over by Romans and Samnites. In the 4th century, Etruria saw a Gallic invasion end its influence over the Po Valley and the Adriatic coast. Meanwhile, Rome had started annexing Etruscan cities. This led to the loss of the northern Etruscan provinces. Etruria was conquered by Rome in the 3rd century BC. Etruscan League. According to legend, there was a period between 600 BC and 500 BC in which an alliance was formed among 12 Etruscan settlements, known today as the Etruscan League, Etruscan Federation, or Dodecapoly. The Etruscan League of 12 cities was founded by 2 Lydian noblemen, Tarchon and his brother Tyrrhenus. Tarchon lent his name to the city of Tarchnia, or Tarquinii, as it was known by the Romans. Tyrrhenus gave his name to the Tyrrhenians, the alternative name for the Etruscans. Although there is no consensus on which cities were in the League, the following list may be close to the mark: Arretium, Kaysra, Clefson, Kurtun, Perusna, Pupluna, Veri, Tarchna, Vetluna, Volterra, Velsna, and Velch. Some modern authors include Russelley. The League was mostly an economic and religious league, or a loose confederation, similar to the Greek states. This is noted on many later gravestones from the 2nd century onwards. According to Livy, the 12 city-states met once a year at the Fanum Voltumni at Volsini, where a leader was chosen to represent the League. There were 2 other Etruscan leagues: that of Campania, the main city of which was Capua, and the Po Valley city-states in the north, which included Spina and Ardria. Heritage, founding and populus Romanus. Those who subscribe to an Italic foundation of Rome followed by an Etruscan invasion typically speak of an Etruscan influence on Roman culture, that is, cultural objects which were adopted by Rome from neighboring Etruria. The prevailing view is that Rome was founded by Italics who later merged with Etruscans. In this interpretation, Etruscan cultural objects are considered influences rather than part of a heritage. Rome was probably a small settlement until the arrival of the Etruscans, who constructed the first elements of its urban infrastructure such as the drainage system. The main criterion for deciding whether an object originated at Rome and traveled by influence to the Etruscans, or descended to the Romans from the Etruscans, is date. Many, if not most, of the Etruscan cities were older than Rome. If one finds that a given feature was there first, it cannot have originated at Rome. A second criterion is the opinion of the ancient sources. These would indicate that certain institutions and customs came directly from the Etruscans. Rome is located on the edge of what was Etruscan territory. When Etruscan settlements turned up south of the border, it was presumed that the Etruscans spread there after the foundation of Rome. But the settlements are now known to have preceded Rome. Etruscan settlements were frequently built on hills, the steeper the better, and surrounded by thick walls. According to Roman mythology, when Romulus and Remus founded Rome, they did so on the Palatine Hill according to Etruscan ritual, that is, they began with a pomerium or sacred ditch. Then, they proceeded to the walls. Romulus was required to kill Remus when the latter jumped over the wall, breaking its magic spell. The name of Rome is attested in Etruscan in the form Rumakai, meaning Roman, a form which mirrors other attested ethnonyms in that language with the same suffix kai, Belsna Kai from Bolsini, and Svema Kai from Savannah. This in itself, however, is not enough to prove Etruscan origin conclusively. If Tiberius is from Theta Ephyrae, then Ruma would have been placed on the Thor River. A heavily discussed topic among scholars is who was the founding population of Rome. In 390 BC the city of Rome was attacked by the Gauls, and as a result may have lost many, though not all, of its earlier records. Certainly, the history of Rome before that date is not as secure as it later becomes. But enough material remains to give a good picture of the development of the city and its institutions. Later history relates that some Etruscans lived in the Tuscus Vicus, the Etruscan Quarter, and that there was an Etruscan line of kings that succeeded kings of Latin and Sabine origin. Etruscophile historians would argue that this, together with evidence for institutions, religious elements and other cultural elements, proves that Rome was founded by Italics. The true picture is rather more complicated, not least because the Etruscan cities were separate entities which never came together to form a single Etruscan state. Furthermore, there were strong Latin and Italic elements to Roman culture, and later Romans proudly celebrated these multicultural influences on the city. Under Romulus and Numa, the people were said to have been divided into 30 curiae and 3 tribes. Few words of Etruscan entered the Latin language, but the names of at least 2 of the tribes, Rhamnus and Lucerus, seem to be Etruscan. The last kings may have borne the Etruscan title Lucamo, while the regalia were traditionally considered of Etruscan origin. the golden crown, the scepter, the toga palmata, the sella curalis, and above all the primary symbol of state power, the fasces. The latter was a bundle of whipping rods surrounding a double-bladed axe, carried by the king's lictors. An example of the fasces are the remains of bronze rods and the axe from a tomb in Etruscan Vetulonia. The most telling Etruscan feature is the word populus, which appears as an Etruscan deity, Fuflunce. Populus seems to mean the people assembled in a military body, rather than the general populace. Society. Government. The historical Etruscans had achieved a state system of society, with remnants of the chiefdom and tribal forms. In this they were different from the surrounding Italics, who had chiefs and tribes. Rome was in a sense the first Italic state, but it began as an Etruscan one. It is believed that the Etruscan government style changed from total monarchy to oligarchic republic in the 6th century BC, although it is important to note this did not happen to all the city-states. The Etruscan state government was essentially a theocracy. The government was viewed as being a central authority, ruling over all tribal and clan organizations. It retained the power of life and death. In fact, the Gorgon, an ancient symbol of that power, appears as a motif in Etruscan decoration. The adherents to this state power were united by a common religion. Political unity in Etruscan society was the city-state, which was probably the referent of Medlem district. Etruscan texts name quite a number of magistrates, without much of a hint as to their function. The Camthi, the Parnish, the Perth, the Tamara, the Maxtrev, and so on. The people were the Mek. The chief ruler of a Medlem was perhaps a Zilok family. The princely tombs were not of individuals. The inscription evidence shows that families were interred there over long periods, marking the growth of the aristocratic family as a fixed institution, parallel to the gens at Rome and perhaps even its model. There is no sign of such a hereditary aristocracy in the preceding Villanovan culture. The Etruscans could have used any model of the Eastern Mediterranean. That the growth of this class is related to the new acquisition of wealth through trade is unquestioned. The wealthiest cities were located near the coast. At the center of the society was the married couple, Tusserthia. The Etruscans were a monogamous society that emphasized pairing. Similarly, the behavior of some wealthy women is not uniquely Etruscan. The apparent promiscuous revelry has a spiritual explanation. Swaddling and Bonfanti explain that depictions of the nude embrace, or symplegma, had the power to ward off evil, as did baring the breast. It is also possible that Greek and Roman attitudes to the Etruscans were based on a misunderstanding of the place of women within their society. In both Greece and Republican Rome, respectable women were confined to the house and mixed-sex socializing did not occur. Thus, the freedom of women within Etruscan society could have been misunderstood as implying their sexual availability. It is worth noting that a number of Etruscan tombs carry funerary inscriptions in the form ex son of an, indicating the importance of the mother's side of the family. Military. The Etruscans, like the contemporary cultures of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, had a significant military tradition. In addition to marking the rank and power of certain individuals, warfare was a considerable economic advantage to Etruscan civilization. Like many ancient societies, the Etruscans conducted campaigns during summer months, raiding neighboring areas, attempting to gain territory and combating piracy as a means of acquiring valuable resources, such as land, prestige, goods, and slaves. It is likely that individuals taken in battle would be ransomed back to their families and clans at high cost. Prisoners could also potentially be sacrificed on tombs as an honor to fallen leaders of Etruscan society, not unlike the sacrifices made by Achilles for Patroclus. Cities. The range of Etruscan civilization is marked by its cities. They were entirely assimilated by Italic, Celtic, or Roman ethnic groups. but the names survive from inscriptions and their ruins are of aesthetic and historic interest in most of the cities of central Italy. Etruscan cities flourished over most of Italy during the Roman Iron Age, marking the farthest extent of Etruscan civilization. They were gradually assimilated first by Italics in the south, then by Celts in the north, and finally in Etruria itself by the growing Roman Republic. That many Roman cities were formerly Etruscan was well known to all the Roman authors. Some cities were founded by Etruscans in prehistoric times, and bore entirely Etruscan names. Others were colonized by Etruscans who Etruscanized the name, usually Italic.